Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do a cartridge comparison of 3 cartridges in the Battle of Meh.
Now, these are 3 cartridges that are well loved, well accepted, and oftentimes called the standard in their own respects. However, today we're going to take a look at them and compare them as close to apples as we can to see really what makes them the meh of cartridges. So, for this battle of the meh cartridges, we have some requirements. The first one is they have to have a similar velocity, because it's not fair that one is going 300 feet a second faster, 400 feet a second faster. So we tried to keep it within about 100 feet a second. And with that, they also have to use the same powder. That's just so that we can eliminate some variance between, okay, one cartridge really likes a powder, one cartridge really doesn't. So we tried to find and settle on a powder that was really a powder that fit the meh standard.
And for bullets, we wanted the same bullet, same company, so we went with Hornady ELDX bullets. Their BCs for the comparison that we're going to be doing with these cartridges are very, very similar, which will lead to very, very similar outcomes. And because of that, they're going to have same shape, same BC, very similar performance after bullet leaves the barrel.
Yep, and we set these standards just so that we could really compare the cartridges as a whole, rather than just comparing, okay, well, this one has a better bullet, this one has the advantage of BC. We really wanted to eliminate the different variables that we could, so this is what we settled on.
Why meh? Well, these cartridges are good. They're not great. They're effective, but there's always a better option.
They have equal to the basic or standard performance set by the industry. So, like we said, they're good, but they're not great.
They're just kind of meh.
They fit the meh. So, first up, and really to no one's surprise, this one needs a little more, if you will. We're going to talk about, first off, the 6.5 Creedmoor. Now, it's a good round, but it's not great. It's in a smaller caliber. It's a little slow, even within the caliber. It's just not impressive.
I mean, when you have your own creator say, I made one better, it's kind of meh.
Exactly. So as the first entry into the Battle of Meh is going to be the 6.5 Creedmoor loaded with the 143 grain ELDX. Now the second entry in our Battle of the Meh is an often forgotten cartridge. It's a very effective cartridge, but nonetheless, it is a wildcat. We're talking about the 7.08 Remington. It is a great round. It's relatively flat when we think about it. It's one of the more successful wildcats off of the 308.
Yep, it matches performance very similar to the 6.5 Creedmoor as previously mentioned. Put the right bullet in it, very similar velocities, similar trajectories. Some of you guys will be hemming and hawing like, how can the 7.08 do it? We'll show you in a little bit.
But this 7.08 is going to be loaded with the 162 grain ELDX loaded with 6.5 stay ball. That's going to help us achieve roughly the same BC and velocity with the same powder as that 6.5 Creedmoor.
Our third and final cartridge, coming back from 120 years or so, 30-06. This one is the standard of performance, but with new powders and innovation, it's woken up just a little bit. That it had a new hip replacement. But you know, we're going to talk about what kind of loading we have for it.
Exactly. We have that 200 grain ELDX. Similar BC to that 6.5 Creedmoor and that 7.08. Loaded with this 6.5 stay ball powder, we achieve roughly the same velocity. So, by default, if the 6.5 Creedmoor is meh, and this 30-06 load matches the 6.5 Creedmoor, the 30-06 is also meh.
Alrighty, so here we got our 3 loadings for the 06, 6.5 Creedmoor, and 7.08. 30-06 we have a 200 grain ELDX going 2750 with a G1 BC of 0.597. 6.5 Creedmoor sitting there with 143 ELDX is going 2850 at a BC of G1 with 0.625, and the 7.08 is going with a 162 grain ELDX is going 2820 with a BC of 0.631. Now, if you want to take a minute, pause this chart so you can look at it, see the data in full, go right ahead.
That big chart has a ton of information, so to break it down for you, we're going to look at the energies, the velocities, and the drop in MOA. As we always do, we're going to take a look, especially with the velocity and the MOA drop, at 500, 1,000, and 2,000 yards. For the energy, we are saying that an elk requires 1,500 foot-pounds of energy. For deer, we're saying that it requires 1,000 foot-pounds of energy. That seems to be a very common standard amongst hunters. Now, for bullet expansion, we're going to say it is a minimum of 1,800 feet per second on bullet velocity in order to expand at an acceptable diameter.
And that's also what Hornady recommends for the minimum expansion velocity is 800 feet per second on the ELDX. So looking here, starting off with the 06 for elk energy, we have 650 yards, 7.08, 500 yards, 6.5 Creedmoor, about 400 yards. Truth be told, a lot of guys are going to be really, really comfortable in those ranges to be able to take elk. They're going to be comfortable, make that shot, make sure that elk is down quickly and efficiently.
Exactly. So, in the aspect of elk hunting within the normal ranges that people strive to obtain, it's sixes across the board. Yes, the Creedmoor has a little less energy at that 400-yard mark, but it is still ample to take elk. Now, looking in the aspect of deer, this is where the 06 and its heavier bullets start to really shine because it has more mass, it's going to have more energy. And we can see that here that it carries its energy out to about 1,250 yards. The 7.08 is just over 1,000 yards, and the 6.5 Creedmoor is 1,000 yards. So, in the aspect of deer hunting, these cartridges are more than capable of taking deer, and they're more than capable of taking deer further than most people are comfortable shooting or are even really able to shoot.
And going on from there, those are pretty extreme ranges. You can't look at energy just as the only aspect. You also need to make sure that bullet expands. That's why we added in this 1,800 foot per second expansion. As you can see, they're all about the same 900, 950 yards for each one of those loadings. That's going to be more or less your realistic limit of these bullets' performance. Yes, the 06 with the energy being out to 1,250 yards for a deer, it's not going to have the velocity for adequate expansion. You're going to want some more velocity, so cut it down, go to that 900-yard mark. You're going to have a great expansion and hopefully get great results with that.
Which is why when hunting, it is sometimes, if not usually, more important to look at the velocity at which your bullet is traveling rather than the energy. Because as we see here with that 30-06, yes, it has energy, but it doesn't have velocity to expand. So that energy, realistically, where the bullet can expand, it means nothing. But if we wanted to look at velocities, and purely from a velocity standpoint, at 500 yards, they're all pretty close. The 7.08 looks like it is still second. 30-06 is the slowest. 6.5 Creedmoor, it might need more, but it's got the velocity there. And that trend continues throughout to the 2,000-yard mark, where the 6.5 Creedmoor has roughly 10 feet a second on the 30-06 and roughly 15 feet a second on the 7.08. So, realistically, there's not much of a difference.
Yep, there's not too big of a difference. They're all in the meh category, as we've been talking about. Going on to drop, very similar as well. 500 yards, you're within half a minute of each other. 1,000 yards, still about a minute minute and a half between the 06 and the 6.5 Creed. 7.08's right there in the middle. And out at 2,000 yards, if you really want to take those out and really plink out there just because you can, why not? The 06 is going to have the most drop, and it's going to be about 5 minutes more. 4.5, looks like 4.25 minutes more than the 6.5 Creed, with that 7.08 still in the middle there.
So, now's the question. Who is the most meh cartridge? So, taking a look and considering everything we just talked about, the 6.5 Creedmoor had the most velocity and the least amount of drop. So, it wins those two categories, but it had the least amount of energy.
Looking at the 06 now, it had the most amount of energy from the get-go, and at the end it had the most amount of energy. It did, however, as well, have the most amount of drop because it was starting off the slowest of the bunch. But the one right in the middle of everything, 7.08.
It had the middle velocity, the middle energy, and the middle drop. And it's for that we are crowning the king of meh to be
the 7.08.